Hello and welcome to Spirit inSight. I'm your host, Lorelei Drock. Today we have Keshia Santero with us. Keshia is a spiritually transformative experiencer who, through a spiritual emergency, found her way back to herself with the realization she's a highly sensitive person. Today she's going to share her spiritual journey from what she saw as a curse to creating her own heaven on earth. Welcome, Keshia.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, it's an honor to be able to sit here and have a conversation with you. So I'm very excited. I'm grateful
Me
to be
too.
here.
Usually, I was just going to kind of ask you because, not all of these experiences are like, oh, I had this and everything changes. Yours has been a long kind of journey through your life in general. And I was just curious, what do you feel led up to this spiritual emergency? If you want to share a little bit of that with us.
um, Ultimately, I think it wasn't just one specific thing. I think my life in general just it's kind of crumbling. And I wasn't aware of it. And so what I mean by that is, like in high school, I, was a honor roll student, did sports and all that, went to college, got accepted into college, and that was easy for me. So, like here I am living the life. And then I go to college and socially I was very reserved. And so in order to get out of my shell, drinking became a thing in my life. And then at that time, whether it's the pressure or whatnot, just my depression really kicked in. My anxiety became more I became more aware of it, to where, you know, it yeah, it just I my mental health really started taking a toll on me. And so then I ended up, yeah, it was just back and forth. I had one semester where I was excelling, and then I'd like flatline again. So it was back and forth, and it was just a struggle. And, at that time I took that as though, as being away from home and such. But it was really just, I think it mostly, the mental part is what was prevalent to me. However, I think that was just symbolic of how far away I was becoming from my spirit. And so that continued further. And there was a point when, I had been in my first relationship, like true love relationship, when I got to college. And when that ended, I found myself very distraught and in despair. And that is when I led from my drinking, my alcoholism, into drug addiction. And it was at that point in my drug addiction, and when kind of it just everything just kind of fell. And I began, then what I felt was psychosis at the time began. And it just seemed as though, yeah, I was just at a point where then I felt like my life was just off track. And everything that was happening to me, it was scary, crazy and stuff. Later on, I've been able to see since then how that was kind of just you get to a point where you can no longer hide from the truth. And so the truth just, yeah, was coming to light. And I didn't understand that at the time. And so yeah, back in 2014, I was in my addiction, and I started seeing things, hearing things and such. Started when I was living in my roommate, and when I'd be alone at night, I'd hear like what I thought was the neighbors, and I'd hear them whispering and stuff. And then hearing people in the hallway, I'd go look, there'd be nobody there. And then had a falling out with that friend, and ended up moving out. And so it was, and then it became more prevalent. And soon the guy I was dating at the time, when I started having feelings of when I'd be over there, then I'd be hearing like a woman sobbing, just like endless sobbing. And when I'd be back at my apartment, I'd hear the same thing. I also began hearing like a engine or a generator that was just running consistently nonstop. And I thought that was really weird. I just figured, outside. And it at that time, I just thought, I was able to hear things from upstairs and around and stuff. And then I began hearing um, my boyfriend and my former friend, the one I had lived with, I started hearing them. And I thought for some reason she must have been an upstairs neighbor because I never met them. And then I was hearing them whispering and stuff and seeing shadows outside my window, correlating with the whispers that they were sneaking around and stuff. And so, and then that, and so that was really odd to me. And it started, yeah. And at that time, I also, was noticing other differences in his behavior at the time as well. And so, then to continue, then, other things, I felt like at that time, it just, I was hearing more things and being more, do I want to say, I felt like I was being followed at that time as well. And I started, recording license plates and such. And it was, at that time, I really felt like I was in a movie, like some, dramatic spy movie type thing. And, like, but the good guy prevails in the end. And so here I was, thinking, I'm like some main character thing and this is all happening. And then it got to where then, okay, so that was about August, September of 2014. And then on Halloween that year, my first, transformative experience, which I thought I just had I thought my psyche broke and I had a mental breakdown. So I'm getting ready to go out that night. And all of a sudden I'm hearing my boyfriend and, some of his roommates and friends I know outside my apartment. And I'm like experiencing them like messing with the windows and stuff. And I thought, they were messing with me because it was Halloween, but it wasn't in like a friendly prank type of a way. It was a little, frightening. And so I messaged my friend who I was going to go out with, and she said she'd be over when she was ready. And so finally, I'm still like in this, it just keeps continuing and getting stranger and stranger. And she shows up, but as she says she's pulling in, and I, assume she's walking in, I hear her have a conversation with my boyfriend and his friend outside, and they say, "Hey, what's up?" She goes, "Nothing." Does Keisha know you're here? And they say no. She goes, "Oh, okay." And then she's walking through my front door. So I said, did you see, like so and so out there? She goes, "No." And I was like, "I just heard you." Like, so my trust, I was just like very on edge, and I, thought she was lying to me. And as I continued to try to, I guess get support or some comfort, explaining what was happening to me because I didn't know. She just kind of lackadaisical, and I felt like that came out funny, lackadaisical, and and so it was very, yeah, just further off-putting, and it's kind of like, well, are you coming with us or not? And I was just like, sorry, I'm in the middle of a breakdown right now. You can go without me. Thanks for the help. Sorry, thank you, but no, thank you. And then she left, and then the next part that I remember is my boyfriend being in my apartment with me, and he was someone that I'd used with because I was in my addiction at this time. And there was a big like Ziploc type bag that, in my perception was full of drugs, and we both had a hold of it, and then it broke open and went everywhere. And then next thing, I'm sitting against my bathtub sobbing, like, what's going on, and I'm looking around, and all over the ground I'm seeing what looked like the drugs that had fallen. And I go, whoa, did that happen? I thought I imagined that. Like, is that real? But it's everywhere on the ground. So after a while, I come to a bit more, and I go over and I pick one up. And then as soon as I'm like questioning it and doubting it, I hold it up, and it's not drugs, but it's like a transparent, kind of like a flexible. It reminds me of like malleable, like hot glue formed in like the shape of crystals, because and what was so weird is that, and it was all over my floor, but it was not there earlier in the day before my friend came over. And so that really, had me trip out. And so it was after that part when yeah, things got even even more interesting. So after that point, then, you know, my experience is that, I was hearing the upstairs, my former friend and neighbors and stuff, and, friends that would be over there, people that I knew that I recognized and voices I was aware of. I'd hear them, like feel like mocking me, smack talking with me. And so we'd have like ego battles going back and forth, like, and they sit there, you're not going to do anything. And so, me, being the stigmatic crazy person, I go flying out my front door, out in the front yard, like hands up, like, what's up? Like, I'm here, where are you? Like looking at the windows, like huffing and puffing, and nothing ever happened. And I'm like, and it's getting so worked up. And so, and then I kept hearing the people around my apartment and such. So at this time, I finally went to my parents and I was like, okay, there's people like around my apartment messing with me or something. I can't figure out how, will you help me? And so at this point, they they were gracious enough to step in and help stock my apartment for a night or two, parking down the block with their binoculars. And then they came back, they're like, there's nothing. And I said, what do you mean? Like, I was hearing them all night. So at that point, I was really scratching my head, like, what is happening? Because that before it didn't dawn on me that the things I was hearing or seeing or experiencing, weren't, like that other people weren't. So that really, that after that, as those experiences and such continued, it really kind of was warming down because it was no longer, this fun movie type of thing. It was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do, and it won't stop. And so, it was about December when I went into the fifth floor, which is the psych ward for the first time, was admitted. And then it was not long after that when, my diagnosis finally was changed to schizoaffective disorder. And so at that point, I was doing a lot of research about schizoaffective, what it is, symptoms and such. And it all seemed very generic and basic. And so then I tried to, and what kept coming up was a chemical imbalance. And I was like, I don't know. So, but I started medication and stuff. And so other things that, as I was reading about it more, other people's experiences, and they talk about, people who hear, the voices and such, how, they'll, a lot of what I was reading or coming to was how, they'd be unfamiliar voices or like one or two, and they'd be the same ones all the time. And, these people would name their voices based on the personality that they perceived them from and stuff. And I was like, well, that ain't me, like I know all these people and stuff. And when I'm seeing them around, like their behaviors and stuff are coinciding with all this stuff that I'm experiencing. So, excuse me, I felt like that didn't fit me. So I had kind of written off the chemical imbalance at that time, and oh gosh, excuse me. And so then at that point I became obsessive with the fact of um I'm going to show people what I'm experiencing. So security cameras, web cameras, my cell phone, recording everything, like going over it all, like just obsessed. That was my life. If I got a note on my security camera, wherever it was, sorry, see ya, I got to go home, like Wi-Fi disconnected, other things, like, and so, uh, yeah. And, there's be times when I thought that, when I'm watching it, I'm seeing, visuals and stuff. And I'd even, catch voices and stuff. And I'd be like, here, you like, listen to this. Do you hear that? And the thing I'd hear the most is, it sounds like water. I go, water? Like, no, it sounds like people. People don't sound like water. Um, and yeah, so very, yeah. very obsessed with that. That was quite a while. And let's see. There the when I would experience these the most is generally when I would be by myself, home alone. After my first hospital admittance, I moved back in with my parents, and so when they'd be gone and stuff, I began to build this, you know, fear of being alone because everything would, not to mention that in the evening, like sundown to sun up is when, all of these voices and things would be happening. And when I was alone, it'd be intense. There's several, each of these, I feel like they would come in cycles where, start small and then get really intense. And well, each of those cycles were very frightening and, very unmanageable. I was always at my wit's end, like knocking on, I want to say, like suicide, death's door, like barely making it through the day, just going like moment by moment to get through. And but in some of them, it wasn't 100% fear, but at the same time, it was kind of like a back and forth. Like sometimes I felt like they were comforting. Like one experience, I was mowing the lawn and they were telling me, about how the other experiences that were coming in that were very traumatic and like graphic and stuff, how I, in my thoughts and my whatnot, in encountering them, how I was very godly and loving and how, I was very pure in that sense. And, I'm tearing up and I was like, oh, I know there's light in me. And then they say, we're just kidding, and I'd be like, oh gosh, and it would tear me apart so much. And it was just like a constant, I felt like they were like my critic, they were demeaning, they were, very just um not nice, like people that, yeah, yeah. And so I had a friend ask me one time, like, do you ever listen to them? And I was like, no, they don't say nice things. Why would, like, why would I listen to them? And so let's see. I feel like I'm getting off track a bit. As far as going back to like experiences as far as that goes. Um, all right, so let's see. The obsession with the recording and stuff. So finally it gets to there was one point when I was home alone and it got to be too much. And I felt I wasn't aware it was my ego at the time, but my ego came up much and much and much in this. And I was sitting there and I was just like, alone for the weekend at my wit's end. And I was just like, this sucks, I don't want to do this, like kind of threw in the towel type of a thing, or, and I'm sitting there, having the thought of, well, what if I just end it all? And they say, don't talk about it, be about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, we'll watch this, So I go and, I get a bottle of my prescription and, and I took that and I happened to, well, I woke up 2 days later, and in do I want to say the loneliest state that I've ever felt. And in that experience, I found myself like sitting in other rooms, being in conversation and coming to, and no one was around and stuff. And so, but yeah, so I came to, and then let's see, that was about 2016. And then following that, oh, let's see. So that was the spring of 16. And then I'm drawing a blank. There's so many things coming at me. Okay, so yeah, there's that experience. And then it got to the point where, because this was so frightening and the experiences I was having, at such, it they were so real to me and like within me that, you know, I couldn't wrap my head around that it was just in my head. But yet I got to a point where it was so scary and frightening to where I switched my mind to say, it is just in your head. So I, did what I could to, um, yeah, just every time things were happening, just be like, nope, it's just psychosis. Nope, it's just in my mind. Nope, it's just this. And my gut every time was just like contracted. And I was like, nope, it's still in my head. It's still in my head. And then they'd even sit there. She still thinks she's crazy. And I'm like, I am crazy, you know? Like, and so, yeah, then, let's see, that continued. And, it got to a point where okay, so then throughout the next few years, even more experiences and such like that, but it got to a point where, uh, well, let's see, then, okay, when I switched to, let me backtrack a little. I started hanging out with another friend. And until this time, the obsession with the recording and stuff, because I even asked myself at that time, if you get the footage you're seeking, then what? And I was like, well, then I know I'm not crazy. Then, like I have it. And there was a part of me that always felt like people, like it felt like they were two steps ahead of me type of a thing. But I felt like I needed, this footage in case I used to hear about being set up a lot and this and that. And so that was like a fear, that I need this because, I'm innocent, but they kept telling me, like this was going to happen. And so I was with a friend one night and I was hearing them, in the nighttime. And I was just like, you hear that? And he goes, yeah. I go, you do? And he goes, yeah. He said, what is it? He goes, they're demons. I go, demons. And then I'm like, my mind started racing because I was like, what? And then he goes, yeah, anyways, what's up? And I was like, what? You just said demons, My mind was blown. I mean, it was around that time when I think my beliefs kind of shifted to that, methamphetamine, opened the doorway to the devil. You know, because it seemed that it was through the beginning of my using when my experiences really surfaced. And a little backstory, like I grew up in the Lutheran church, baptized and confirmed. And, throughout this period of my life, I still, thought of God and Satan, heaven and hell, all that as separate. And I even thought of love as something that you receive from someone else. I was not aware that there was self-love and that you can love yourself. And, so I thought all this was separate. And so, all the voices I was hearing and everything else as separate. And so now I had this idea that, I was hearing demons and stuff. And so that really manifested more of this darkness that I was perceiving. And other experiences that were coming in became, and it wasn't just things that, when it was just that hearing about myself and stuff, a lot of things were like, everyone's laughing at you, no one likes you, they're using you, just negative things, there's a whole list of them, but anywho. And so, but then I would have some experiences where, this pertaining to like my family and such, which were very traumatic, and about, gruesome and horrific things, happening to them. One thing was this thought that like, or, experience that like that something I had done or whatnot, put them in like jeopardy or whatnot. And so, or they were being like blackmailed or, what's the other word? Coerced to, in order to get to me, in order for these people to like get to me, or, it was like so whenever I never really ever shared any of these experiences or any of this with anyone because I was struck in fear. Because when I tried to open up to my mom or something, I'd always get this energy and stuff of, or within my soul that, she was speaking in code and I had to speak in code, and that because people were watching this and that, and safety was at the matter. And so I never really opened up, and I just kept it all inside, but yet at the same time all of that was resonating within me. And so yeah, and that a lot of those experiences and instances continue to come up. And there was one instance when I really attached to that, and that was about beginning of 2019. And that yeah so that was very traumatic for me. And that was about the time when I was in legal trouble for my addiction, and my forced sobriety began. Getting through that sobriety stretch, all my experiences and such, soft and faint, and I would just hear some mild whispering here and there. But then when I was released and all papers signed, I still wanted to use, and I started using again. And I went on like a 3-day bender, and at the end of the bender I was laying down, and in unison I hear all these voices say, "We're back." And I'm like, oh really? But I don't know why I expected anything different. So then yeah, just further experiences such forth and that, and then let's see, I mean, there's tidbits and other experiences when, then things were happening that other people, well, around this time, my biggest fears were that I was now, frightened of the dark, scared of being alone, and scared of silence. And so my coping mechanisms became, they were all geared around making sure those three things never happened. And so, I spent I had, at the end of the year, I sat there and I said, this has been like my worst year yet, because I put up with lying, cheating, stealing, and abuse, just to manage not being alone, not being in silence, and not being in the dark. So it's kind of like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. I felt like I couldn't win, and I felt like I was cursed and all this stuff. I felt like I'd never live a normal life again. And so as time started continuing, during these experiences, my paranoia, which before used to be so crippling to where I'd be sitting there wanting to say something, but I'd be like scared of what to say, trying to decide which word to say, and I couldn't spit it out. I'd just be frozen. And to where even my body walking around, it like became like it just broken down in stress, constant fight or flight for about 8 years. And it really took a toll on me. But as these experiences started coming a little more, and throughout this process, I was doing a lot of analyzing mentally, and so, realizing things as far as, that, the people I was choosing to spend my time with were not in my best interest. They did not serve me. However, I took accountability that I chose not to, remove myself from situations. And so there was progress being made internally. And so as some of these experiences continued, and that paranoia started ceasing and stuff. And so in those moments, I was like, okay, I'm sitting here, and I'm sensing all this going on, but I'm not like feeling mad crazy right now. So I'm sane, but yet this is still happening. So that was a new perspective for me. And it brings me into one of my last what I would consider a psychotic event, which was last May. And I'd been hearing things about like reptilians, and do I want to say mind control, body snatching, things like that. And I was led out to the garage, and I was going through newspapers and such. And one was, it was an article, and I think it was like November 21st, 2015. and it was talking about this family from Texas that was thanking their family, the Nebraska family, for taking care of their son who had died in like a homicide type thing that was at Sonics. And so at this time, and I had the picture of the Sonics, and in there I could see like a crustacean, like crab, like in the Sonics, and I could see like lasers around it, and this like, I want to say galactic because it seemed like, cyborg, or like cyber type of a incident that happened there. And yeah, I just kept reading it, and I'm like, why would a Texas family be talking about a Nebraska family? Like, I'm from Nebraska, and the names and everything, it something was really clicking with me. And then another thing, yeah, I was looking at maps and such, and the map I was looking at was not the United States and stuff. The world was different. And I kept being led back to Massachusetts and like a border being around there. And I was thinking that, my family was, like, don't want to say like, trapped, like in a spell, or like in a, within an area, and that I had to free them and such. And, about, because my sun sign is Cancer. And so, it led me to that, crab and Cancer, and something about my dad being the crab king, and I was, his heir. And so, because he did not manage to do that in this lifetime, that I was to finish the job. And so I was gonna go home. And to me, home, originally then it led to this thing where, my dad was like, here, go get some pennies out. And in his notebook, there was like 3 dates written there, and they were from like 1751 and like a few others. And all of a sudden I go, whoa, are these like his other lives? Like, that's so awesome. That's powerful, So also saw an article about pennies that time, and how the metal or the material they used to make them was different. How the government was asking people who had the prior or the original metal to turn all theirs in, and how, yeah. And so, I was looking for these 3 pennies that had these dates, because they, for me, resonating in that there were 3 checkpoints that I had to go through in order to get back home, and that each of these was like a key or a token for that checkpoint.
Hmm.
And so, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, where am I going? And then I saw something that said the caves, and I go, the caves, Colorado, okay. And then I'm thinking to myself, but the caves I went to on vacation are in like Rapid City. And I go, okay, well, Colorado, so let's just go. So I left my phone at home. I only had my wallet, a little bit of money. Gave my dad a hug. I was leaving, and because my phone, I felt like I was being tracked and stuff. So I go driving off, and then all of a sudden, I'm feeling like there's people following me and stuff, because they're trying to get me before I make it, because, I'm on a mission. And then I see, the sign on the road, it said, fines double when workers present. And I go, workers, oh, light workers. Okay, I'm a light worker. And so I'm like, okay, double. So going double the speed, and I was going, and at this time going up to this, I have been in multiple car wrecks, most of my life, lucky every time. And so all of a sudden, over the last few years, I irrationally started having like this really PTSD in a car. And so here I am, flooring it, buckling up, and I'm like crying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? But the car is very, very stable, very relaxed. So I ease into it. And at that time it was like, okay, so this is a car, but it also, it's like transformer into a spaceship. And I could tell that. And, like, it just was very, zhoo, zhoo, zhoo. And so then I saw the sign, where it's the median, and it has the thing over there. So I was thinking, okay, so caves. Then my, was guided towards, okay, to get, like out into space, to, that I had to follow that sign. Because another thing that was coming to me is that there were different signs and things around for spacecrafts and stuff that travel here where most people don't see them. And that these yeah, and so that I was just, aware of these at this time and, following those. And so here I am flooring it, and so I go over the median in the um highway, and it dips, and then as I'm coming up to the sign, I'm looking and I see no one over here, so I go to dip back over, and then all of a sudden my car is just slowing down at a diagonal angle real fast, and I start screaming, and I'm on my brakes, and I'm like, ah, no, like this, something's not right, something's not right. And then I look over, and as soon as I come to a stop, immediately there's a white truck with three guys there, and they come around. And so I had my little satchel with my 3 coins, and I said, okay, like, trust, trust, I'm not sure what to expect, so I don't know if this is right or not, but it's not what I thought was going to happen. So I hand him one of the pennies because I thought this was the first checkpoint, and he takes it and he throws it down. He goes, she's got a pill. I go, that's not a pill. What, like, what's going on? So then I started getting really anxious. And one of the guys got behind, when he was bracing my head. And at this point, the sign, so I was going this way, and the sign was in the front of my car right here, and it was a white sign. And when as I'm looking up in my car, I see yellow. And so it's in my front end. My driver's side window is the only thing that was broken, like smashed in, shattered. My windshield was cracked. And as I'm looking at the windshield in the reflection, I see these brown eyes staring back at me. And they were just very soft, almost like sad eyes looking at me. And, then the guys asked me, about it. He said, did you unbuckle yourself and stuff? And I was like, I know I buckled, but I didn't unbuckle myself, but I was unbuckled, and then, they're talking about, blood and something. And he goes, oh no, it's not hers. And I'm looking around because there was blood on my, a couple drops of blood on my shorts and such, but I was unscratched. And at this time, I'm looking at the sign and things, and my mind is going how, like, it wasn't an actual sign I hit, but it was like a Men in Black vehicle that, tried to swerve at the same time, like, and got me. And that makes sense. Anyways, and so then the ambulance pulls up, and as they have me walk out because I'm okay, and put me onto the stretcher into the ambulance, and I have the broken glass under my legs, and I feel the sun on my face, and I go, oh, like, I was at peace. I'm like, I'm going home. I felt like I was laying on the beach with the sun in my face. And then they're starting to ask me questions and such. And back to when I was looking at the newspapers, one of the articles had to do with alkaline water. And so it had me thinking that the reason I was always attracted to the crystal meth had to do with like the crystalline light body, and such. So as I'm still in this, part trusting this experience, or just going with, just, I don't know, just going. And so the emergency personnel in the ambulance was asking me like, who are you? And I go, oh my gosh, I don't know my name. And I was like, I don't remember my name. And I said, I'm the son of my father. And they go, okay, what's your name? I said, I am the son of my father. And I said my father's name. And they go, and they just kind of laughed. And I was like, why, like, what is my name? And I don't mean like Keshia, because that was in my mind, but like I was thinking, like my actual name. And so then they were asking me other questions, have you been drinking or any drugs? And I said, oh, crystal meth. Like, although I had used that morning, I was like, okay, this is maybe like the code. So they, because there's a reason I was attracted to it. So this is the code to, let them know that, hey, this is me, and I thought maybe the ambulance was taking me to a secret place to, like, get me back home. And so, I mentioned that I'd used and that I'd smoked it because, something about the vapors in the smoke, was, important. So I find myself in going to the hospital. And when I got wheeled in, said I don't want to be on the directory because I didn't want anyone to know I was there. You know, and then they put me into a room, and this is the first like emergency room ever that I've seen like a camera up there. And so instantly I'm like, okay, something's not right. And I had this fear come over me. that not getting out of there, and that they here, let me continue. So then the police officers arrived, and I saw they both had blue eyes, and it was registering with me at the time that reptilians, and my paranoia was shooting up, and they, were talking about what I said in the ambulance, and that they wanted to do like a blood test or something for the DUI type thing. And I was like, okay, no, they're just trying to get my DNA. My DNA is different. Um, I can't let that happen. That's not going to be a good outcome. I, so I, refused and such. And yeah, I felt like I was going to be like a test subject, and be, shipped away to the government, and such like that. And so that was it was very real to me. And so then when I got back home again after this, believing I was going back home, I was very kind of like low, and do I want to say despair, just kind of empty, like, whoa, like I really, like believed that, and it didn't happen, and I was lost. And so to end all this, or to get to the light part, so that was May. And then in since those following 2 months, I found myself in withdrawal and stuff from drugs, and finally admitted to myself that this sucks, I'm suffering, I don't want this anymore. And then when I was choosing to align with that thought and acting on it, I got a download that all of a sudden it was like, this is all spiritual. And it wasn't just like, hey, this is spiritual. It was like, oh my gosh, like everything, it's hard to define, but yeah, and then I was just, okay. And so following that, then I spent my time, learning and looking into spirituality and what that entailed. And during that time, spirit, relieved me of them for the time. And yeah, it led me into all the growth and stuff I've done. I don't know if you want to jump in for a couple questions. I could continue on about that, but I feel we'll get into how all those experiences, how I've been able to interpret them and understand them. The one thing I do have to say though is that I've always felt like, in the terms of labels, like seeking a definition that fit every experience. And that just, yeah, blows my mind even more, because the truth is there's pieces of little that all have to do with everything else. It's not just one thing, because then it, discounts the other, or, then, so yeah. Thanks for letting me share.
You're welcome. I always love to just let people tell their story for a while. And different things that I picked up through there, I just want to ask you about. Now, a lot of this started with what you said were voices, and usually it was people that you knew or situations you felt were going on outside of what you could probably see. And you and I are friends, so I have these, and usually they manifest that they really did happen. It's just not something I should be consciously aware of. So I understand that whole thing. So I'm wondering for you, if like any of that stuff came to fruition, like you found out later these conversations were happening, or that whatever you thought was like physically going on, like even with maybe your boyfriend and your ex roommate, those kind of things, did you ever have any validation of some of that came through to you afterwards?
Yes. So, well, I feel so. I knew it. Yeah. So I'll just say I saw them afterwards, after I had left that situation, I saw them together, and the look on both of their faces, I was just like, all right, like, so yeah. And aside from just the things I was hearing and seeing, like the shadows and stuff, when I was, in a room with him, his energy itself was just different. You could tell that yeah, that was very obvious. So yeah.
Yeah, I could sense it through the energy, but I just wanted to clarify it to the audience, because um, you know, that's how I can sense, who's involved in who and what's going on, and I think some people, maybe harder for others who are not, like you describe yourself as a highly sensitive person. And I guess I fall in that range too, as far as like the ability to read energy. So like that's how I sense who's connected to who energetically wise. So you were feeling that, I think, but you weren't necessarily consciously aware of connecting the dots because of the state that you were in. Do you feel that's accurate?
Yeah, it really, until actually recently, this morning, I was thinking more about it as I was going over my story. You know, if you want to term things like psychic abilities, but a lot of when I'm going through things, or I say like, oh, I think this, when I'm talking to myself, or I feel like this, and it just dawned on me that those are by some people classified as like clair sentient and like clair cognizant. And so
Clear audience. Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, and it wasn't until, you know, recently in this past year when I have, backtracked and done like a timeline of my life and looked into myself, when I was aware of how sensitive I was as a child and other incidences like that.
That there was this, I know there's a lot that you see of what I call rabbit holes, where people do think they're being followed, or, there's these conspiracies and stuff. And I always say, in those senses, and since I've heard you talk about this, what you believe you sort of are creating in a sense. So, and that tends to be the case from what I've seen. And there's so many levels of reality that people shouldn't just actively dismiss that sounds so crazy, because there is levels of that. But there was something interesting also that I wanted to comment on, that your accident experience. You had started off talking about the crab beings. Now, I'm familiar with those because I have family that has had contact with those, and I also have a friend who had a near-death experience where Metatron, the archangel, appeared as a crab-like being. So I'm just very curious. Have you ever looked more into that aspect of why you were so attached to, the crab-like beings?
Um, you know, no, at that time I just felt it, was connected through the zodiac. But since that's in my awareness now, I'm definitely going to do that. So
I just wanted to, but yeah, I've heard of it in numerous places, so I was just curious if you ever had any more contact or information about that, just being what I know. So I was just curious. So thank you for that. And yeah, I'll be interested to follow up with that one. And so as your story progressed, I'm seeing that like you became more and more into your own realizations and trusting your own intuition a little bit more of this. Now, looking back, would you say you were more divinely guided? Like for those like voices and different things, I've always found that they were trying to show me areas of my life that I was kind of maybe aware of, but denying. Like I don't want to think my boyfriend's cheating on me. I don't want to think that my family's doing this, those type of things. But they all came to fruition, or were seen. Have you gotten clarity as far as looking back, how much you were kind of protected or guided, and how do you use that intuition going forward, like in your current life situations? Are you trusting that internal guidance?
um like one thing that's coming to me is, as far as like the um nobody likes you, you can't trust anyone, they're lying to you, they're using you. Those were all beliefs I held within myself, that, connected with that I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, and they weren't things that I was aware of, and so it really was bringing that part of myself to light. And it was scary and uncomfortable because yeah, it wasn't in my scope, of myself. And so another thing, as far as those, like, the wishy-washy comments and stuff, I realized that I was hanging on to the words of everything I heard. Like, if you told me this, and I was. If you told me I wasn't, then I wasn't. And it just, instead of being my own person and my own being, I was hanging on the word of whatever other, you know criticism or remark I was hearing. And so And then, yeah,
So you
go ahead.
kind of found your own sovereignty.
Yeah.
When I hear those things, it's kind of like you almost let people form your reality because you base how you see yourself on all this outside information and feedback and mirroring, so to speak. So, are you at a stage you feel you've put those mirrors down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, your perspective, I'm curious now. You know how your friend said, "Oh, those are demons talking to you." I hear them too. Um, what is your perception on all of that now, as far as how do you perceive those? Like some people say it with ego, some would say it's like your shadow self, things you believed about yourself, that you kind of programmed yourself with but weren't aware of. I mean, how do you see those voices now?
Um, so the voices that I didn't recognize per se, there's about two particular, one female and one male. And, they're the ones that I still hear. And, I say, who are you? We're your higher self. And I said, but you don't sound so loving, like easygoing, and I'm like, I know there's tough love, but, you can be a little more gentle. And so this morning I was asking, why do I hear a male voice? Why don't I recognize the female voice? And that saying the male voice was I'm not sure if they said like my twin flame or my masculine side. Um, but these I wouldn't call them, I no longer think of, demons as being able to impart my mind and such. I think of really just leading me back to myself, and being in resistance to that. And yeah, so as far as I feel like I'm trailing off. Anyway, so yeah, I I see how everything that was spoken to me and such, how it I I'm thankful for it all. I'm grateful for it. And I see how it has got me to where I am. And without that, I don't know. But yeah, there it's just yeah, so I'll leave it there.
It's kind of like they were the catalyst to your awakening, because
Mhm.
the more I think you get hit with those things, the more you reject them and realize, no, I'm not those things, and you kind of take your power back in that.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, like, where are you now? Because that was a year ago, your accident. How has your life changed since then, and your perception?
Um, so as far as like say understanding my experiences, I feel, like we kind of touched on, some of it was, aspects of me experiencing things going on outside of me, people I know, like say psychically. Other experiences were other aspects of myself in like other incarnations and other things that resonated true in my spirit, but were not, part of this reality, this life for me. And that other, and then other aspects where, say like my shadow, my inside, my, that I'd shoved down that was coming to light for me to work on. So it's just kind of it's all, it was all me, but it just, like thinking it was just different. And it was, so yeah, since then though, I, aside from, doing the work and healing, it, being radically honest with myself and all the things that, like, okay, I might feel like I'm full of love, but that doesn't mean my heart's been open. I realized my heart was iced over, and that all these people I was attracting and stuff was because I was mirroring in that. And so being honest with myself about that, um, and yeah, there was just going from, this victim mentality to survivor mentality, and then from survivor mentality to empowering myself. Like I create my reality, I am in control of me, I am accountable of me. And really just from there, as each thing has come up, surrendering and trusting, which has been yeah, that it's easier said than done. And every day I find myself, having to find a new way to implement, surrendering and trusting and releasing, letting go of control. And so yeah, it just but choosing, in being that accountable and in control of, your reality, it's a choice. You can choose. And the one thing that is coming up to me again and again is the power of, believing what you believe. Like I had said, when my friend told me they were demons, I started believing they were demons, and I was, in this hell, and so I perceived I was in hell because I believed that. And then now I believe that, love is all that is real, that, the world is shifting, love is coming to light, and that, everything, yeah, just that the just just light, and really integrating what that means for me, in a step by step, day by day, activity by activity thing. The biggest thing that I'm working on right now is just being and enjoying, because I still have that, I went from those years of not doing anything, and being stagnant, to now I'm kind of in motion, but I want to go, 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 go. And it's, kind of burning me out. And so it's just, kind of finding that balance, mind, body, and spirit. And so, yeah, it's, but being gracious towards yourself in that sense, because it is all a process, is all learning. And, it all happens when it's supposed to, divine timing and such. And yeah, just trusting and believing and not being in resistance. Don't be in resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's when you create the suffering. Being in the divine flow, I always say, brings abundance. And I'm just curious, because I know that there are probably a lot of people out there that can relate to your story. What would you say were the most, I don't know, what tools and thought processes do you feel helped you the most to get through all that to where you are now?
um the very first thing when I started getting on YouTube and, like feverishly searching for stuff was, your thoughts and affirmations and reprogramming and changing your narrative, because when I shifted from that victim to survivor mentality years ago, then I was no longer looking at myself as, well, like, a victim, as though, it's happening to me, but realizing that life is happening for me, not to me. And so, having those thoughts, like, I'm worth it, I'm beautiful, I am lovable, and all this, because, it's when you hear the same thing again and again and again, it becomes your beliefs. And so it's what yeah, so reprogramming your beliefs, letting go of old ones, allowing space for new ones to come in. But really, I spent like 3 months just affirmations all the time. Anytime something came in, I said, I reprogrammed it with a positive affirmation. And so soon, it wasn't too long when, yeah, those negative things, just kind of weren't coming in anymore. And then it went from, just doing that to taking it outwards while I'm experiencing things. And as other things are coming in, then integrating it that way, so that it, like the process of, like, now I've incorporated it. Now let's, like do it in real life, and yeah, so that, your beliefs, your thoughts, and another thing, working on, let's see, like letting go of all limitations, and realizing that every limitation we put on ourselves, and how, what those actually look like, as far as saying, oh, I'm too shy for that, or I can never do that, or I don't like that, or I don't want to do that, I don't feel like it, I'm too tired. Those are all limitations, because if you believe that you can, you can, you will, you do. So it's just, yeah, being really honest with yourself. And the first step isn't like, okay, like, okay, so say, I don't know, let me think of an example. Like, I'm in healing my voice, I'm learning to sing. So instead of saying, oh, I could never sing, one, the belief, the thought is that, so singing, as far as the expectation and letting go of the outcome, I enjoy singing. So I don't have to sound like anyway to enjoy singing, to be able to sing. And also, well, I can go further into that. But yeah, so removing that limitation, but also, now I feel like I got sidetracked. But yeah, so removing limitations, awareness is the first thing. So if you can be aware of, okay, like I said I don't feel like doing that. Why don't I feel like doing that? And then being honest with yourself about like, because it makes me nervous, because I feel like I'll fail, that awareness is the first step to the process that, will, start removing those limitations to start, freeing yourself, so if, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like asking you, like, I would say, like, is that a loving thought? Like, why do I think I'm this? What is that? Who said that? Where'd that come from? Like following that trail. And it's like, no, I created that in my own mind. And why did I do that? All of that, like you said, that accountability and responsibility to yourself. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now I know that through all of this, uh, when did you get to the point from, like, where people, like, you thought you were crazy to the point where you're like, no, it's spiritual? I know that wasn't an easy transition, but when did you start to realize they were gifts rather than curses, and that you weren't crazy? I mean, what literally shifted that perception? Was it when your guides came in and said, your higher self, and just reminded you who you were, or did it just kind of like, was it a slow process?
um like I said, the download that I received last summer, it was in July, about being spiritual. I still wasn't, didn't have the grasp that my experiences, you know, were part of my gift, I know a lot of people say, your greatest struggle will turn out to be your greatest gift. I kept hearing that. And until I say that right now, that just clicks. So, um, so yeah, just because I used to sit there like, oh, like I want to practice my gifts, hone in on them, and strengthen them. And then I'm like, what are they? What are my gifts? And like I said, as I've gone back over my life and my childhood and stuff, and seeing some of the my experiences and stuff, I realized that it isn't just something that happened through the spiritual emergency, but it's something that I have been my whole life. And so definitely a process. And what has deterred me the most is trying to fit them into a box, into a definition, like the labels, like the psychic, the astral travel, out of body experience, what's another one? All those things. And so yeah, because I'd sit there and I'm like, well, that's okay, that connects, that doesn't. Well, okay. So next one, I'm like, man, what are my gifts? And realizing that, yeah, it's yeah, so I don't fit in a box. My gifts don't need to, so
That's awesome that you say that, because that's kind of one of those things I would say, like, even my bios, I'll be like, well, she doesn't like labels, but to help you understand her, this is it, because I'm not fond of that either. But I feel like humanity, like we feel we have to understand everything, and we do want to put that box, but we don't realize labels also carry the energy of everything anybody has ever put into it or believed it to be, so I always have that friction of it, for my own thing. So I totally understand that. um and to me, like, yeah, I can call on them if I need them a little bit, but mostly it's whatever's in the divine flow. I have them all, but it's like, you know, like how you started to hear voices to show you things were going on that you weren't aware of and things like that. I trust the divine to point me wherever that happens. Do you find that that's kind of how your gift work, where like, I'll know something here, or I'll be guided here, or I see things now that I can trust? Is that kind of how you see that now? Or is it more like, I need this, like some people act like they can call it on will, where me, it's like whatever fits the highest good in that moment kind of flows. So I was just curious for you.
I think I'm still in a period where I'm coming into everything, and so trusting my gifts and coming into trusting myself, trusting my intuition, trusting my higher self. And, yeah, just through by being in flow, I'm seeing how much that, it's all connected and getting those confirmations that, yep, yep, like, um,
Yeah.
trust yourself, like, yeah. So, definitely, there's times perhaps, before working or something, I might, like sit there and say, I give myself full permission to be fully present, to, show up with love and creativity, let it flow. But I find that, yeah, so as far as like gifts and stuff for myself personally, that creativity and things, the genius is within, I find that by exploring and going through those routes and actually doing things, that is like giving my permission and unlocking myself and tapping into my full potential. And every time I'm like doing things, things are just coming to me, and like as I'm drawing or as I'm doing this, and I thought like, oh, let's do a backwash, just add water. And I'm gonna go, what was a backwash? Like, okay, and it's just, yes, it's been amazing and it's been fun. And yeah, just removing those limits and tapping into that. So, and yeah, as far as spirit, I find right now I'm really more in the flow. I find I feel like you know, I can ask more, from a higher self, like can you clarify? Can you guide me towards this and stuff? And because I got a message that, asking questions shows that you are wanting to learn, and so and that I don't have to do this all by myself. And so strengthening that relationship and trusting and yeah, just flowing.
Beautiful. What creative outlets are you finding these days that you enjoy? Like Spirit has always told me to find your joy, whatever, my mom's like, yours was dancing. You need to start dancing. What would you say keeps you in that state of joy? Because I always talk about this where happiness versus joy. Like happiness is an emotion. It's kind of almost like a state of lack. It's something you always feel like you have to have and you're trying to chase it. What's going to make me happy? Where joy is like a state of being, like knowing everything is for and through you and in that flow. What would you say that creatively where that is taking you?
Um, I've always been into art and music. Younger, I play the saxophone and then I took art classes and stuff. I just got a guitar, singing and stuff. As far as joy, like those things are great outlets for me, but what I find is bringing joy in or releasing my joy, is really just being myself. And touch on that a bit more. So I was thinking about this recently. A lot of my friends and relationships, I was always with an extroverted person. And I had this one friend that I always felt like she was attention seeking, do things for attention in front of the boys and stuff. And I was always like, like, no, I like put a negative spin on that attention, but not realizing that it was me that feared attention. And therefore I negated any attention as negative, and so, in the opposites attract and learning that, what you're attracted to, there's generally a quality and stuff about that, whether it's stability, say someone's a good dresser, if they, like for me, music and stuff, musicians, or just like outspoken or bubbly or, like, and so realizing that that's what I've always been attracted to all my life, so like in the car, singing music and dancing and stuff, I'd always sit there and I'd be like, I don't have the personality for that. I don't have the personality. So now I'm silly, I'm weird, I'm all those things. And so when I like, get a song in my head, I'll just start dancing, like in the kitchen and people are you dancing? I go, yeah. But every time, when I feel myself swallowing my words or, like, oh, I can't do that right now, I do it. And as I do it, I just come alive and alive even more. And I have that joy back because I'm not editing myself. I'm not worried about what other people think. And so it's just releasing all, like, do I want to say chains and all that stuff, just being me, being authentic. And so that's where I'm finding my joy is finally being me. So, and actually discovering what me is because yeah, that it's all new to me. So yeah.
that authenticity, spirit speaks that so often to me. Especially where, and you mentioned this too, and I say this a lot because that's after one of my experience, they told me that, truth always comes to light. So, especially with the higher availability of light where everything is being revealed and we're being, I don't want to say forced, but the availability to remove those masks and be authentically us is so high right now, that they show me that there's going to come a time that, like, you can't be anything but authentic, and I think a lot of people are really struggling with that because they're still looking at those mirrors and how they want to be seen versus how they see themselves. Uh, what would you recommend to people, like how to find that? Like what worked for you in the sense of being able to step into that authenticity?
Um, okay, so I, talk a lot about how I lived my life within a comfort zone. And I felt like the comfort zone was comfortable and safe, and anytime I did anything, I had my process, which was long and drawn out because I had a hard time letting go of things because I didn't like change. And coming to the understanding that the comfort zone, it just has a prettier name than the fear zone. So yeah, just doing uncomfortable things, and it started off small, such as I started answering my phone calls again because I'd always screen them and send them to voicemail. And like on meetings and stuff, showing up with my camera on, and then eventually sharing, and then getting more into that, other things, yeah, just, and what has kept me propelling forward is that not waiting until, well, every time I do those uncomfortable things, I'm lit up, I'm excited because I overcame, and every time I've overcame, it's been fun, it's been exciting. There was nothing, there's no fear there. And so understanding that, so yeah, and in doing uncomfortable things, not waiting until, the thing you're doing is comfortable to take it to the next level. It's just always challenging yourself in love, support and encouragement, that you, yeah, not, and so yeah, just in doing those things, you can show yourself that, there's nothing to fear, and that, you enjoy those things. And so then you start to think of all the things that, you crossed off your list, or, like wrote off, and yeah, working towards those, and realize that you've always been drawn to those. For me, I've always been drawn to those things, and that there is a reason, because I love them and they excite me. And that finally, there's, in being authentic and no comfort zone, that yeah, so also in like stepping out of the comfort zone, it's a process, but it's exhilarating and liberating. But you realize that, the fear zone is just something that, you made in your mind. There is no fear. And so debunking all that fear as well. So yeah, I could go on forever, but thanks.
No, that's beautiful. And that's kind of, I remember after my first near death experience, that's how I was, like anything I thought I was afraid of, I would just make myself do it. I kind of lost that through the years, you just get busy living life, and that is so true. Like now, everywhere I push, it is like even speaking and doing what I do now is like, no, never. And so at so many times, and I knew there was such a huge change that, I put it off. Don't put it off. Now, what would you say that like through your whole story and your whole experiences, what would you think for yourself? I always kind of look at it this way, like, what if you could look back and tell your younger self something, like what advice would you give yourself then?
Hmm. Oh, it's a great question. I'm not sure if I've ever considered that. I know there were, feelings or knowings from when I was younger that I kind of let fall away from me, such as feeling I have this great potential and the, things that I desired to do, like acting was one, an extroverted type activity. And then as time went on, attached to all these things that, led me to believe that that wasn't for me, and writing off, my desires and my dreams as a child, but that those dreams, those beliefs, to follow them, and that there's a purpose for them, and to not give up on them, because yeah, I feel we come into this world with our genius intact, and so it's through time when we tend to cover that up a bit, and so yeah, it's a trust your genius, and follow it, and it won't ever steer you wrong.
Do you feel you're doing that now? I mean, that you found your way back to it?
Yeah, at least on the road too. So
So
I
that's
feel,
awesome.
yep.
Yeah. Um, and being that you had this, it seems like kind of a roller coaster of experiences. What would you say is your biggest takeaway that you learned through that whole expression?
Goodness. That to trust myself, that it all led me back to me, and just that what I took away from it is that that's definitely something I'm going to think on now. But at this moment, um, that there's always light at the end of the tunnel, always light. The light is there right now, and so, yeah, to follow it, and that it's not the easiest road, but it's worth it.
Right.
And there's so much beauty going through it, not just on the other side, but in the process. So
Yes. I find often it's, your perception of it. Like even when I know there's this, what feels to be a low point, it's this or something better. Something's always on the horizon. If something is being taken away, it just no longer serves you. There's something better coming. And so that helps get through those moments, of that. And I love how you say there, there's always light, because, with faith, you're always provided for in that unconditional state of love for yourself. you know um I think that's the hardest thing to portray an understanding of, unless you felt that unconditional love for yourself. Because I think on a human level, we think like love, we say love shouldn't have conditions, but we put so many limitations, expectations, and everything else on it, that it's not the divine love that, like, we talk about in a spiritual aspect. um, what does love mean to you now, after being through all this?
what does love mean to me? Love is something that you give freely, you loving someone authentically, not for what they do for you or how they make you feel, but because you love them. You love them for who they are, who they're not, who what they do and don't do. Love, well, I mean, so yes, unconditional love, but also love is for yourself as well. Self-love, it all starts within, as within, so without. And so, in my quest for, healing, I thought I was gonna find my true love and this and that, and I did, but the thing was, it was me. So and now, I'm loved, I'm whole, and now, I'm not scared of the dark, I'm not scared to be alone, I'm not scared of silence. Those are all things I embrace. And yeah, it's just it yeah, and now that I have that, now that I'm whole, now that my heart is full, um it's beautiful, it's powerful, and now I'm able to give that unconditional love to others because I found it for myself. So
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's so true. Uh, Now I know you got a lot in the works. I just wanted to give you an opportunity of what you're working on now and how you are giving that love back to the collective.
Yeah, I started a blog, and I think it'll be posted.
Yeah.
Insights and Revelations. I also began a Facebook page, and it's just a place where I felt called to start opening up and sharing myself freely. As far as healing my voice and empowering myself, because I believe that self-expression is so powerful, and it is through sharing our experiences when we begin healing, begin to empower ourselves, and we can and help inspire others and such. And also I learned that every time I share and am open, I'm learning more things about my experiences and about myself. So it's just like a revolving door. But um yeah, so just opening up, and putting myself out there, doing uncomfortable things. That's just just start part of my first steps of this process. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I'm excited for you. I know that you've been doing some podcasts and you'll be speaking this fall as well and some other things. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you.
And and I think using your voice, really speaks to those that have been there. From what I was always shown, that like all the trials and tribulations or whatever you want to label those, um, that open us up also help us to be that remembrance guide. I rather say that than healer, for people that are in those moments. Spirit has always showed me like you can't reach someone at a frequency you've never experienced. So I think your story really reaches people who have gone through or are in the midst of that, and to see the light that you do, so it really matters that people share these stories. And I am so thankful to you, because I know it's not easy, to speak about these things. Now we're all light and shiny, but in those moments they were, as we discussed, very dark for you. And I was just curious, like, basically, what was the light you hung on to that kept you going in those dark moments?
um you know my niece was born about the year of my I was gonna say experiences, my emergency. And there's something like her innocence, her light, that every time, I'd be in the dark place, in the midst of all this, I, imagine her light and her spirit. Um, and it is what I held on to. Um, and it's interesting because I found that now she, we have work to do together in this life and such. And and but yes, just that innocence, that purity, I think is really what came out, is that there is light, there is pureness, because I believe there was this darkness, what however I perceived it. And so at that time I was like, if there's this darkness, there's this light, and I saw that through her. And so that is what I held on to, and that I was just like, there's that, there's got to be this, so I'm gonna get there. And so
I was just wondering, I don't know, something guided me to ask you that, so I was just curious. That's kind of, yeah, in those moments, it just takes those little things, because I think you were very immersed during that time in duality, that up there. How do you see that now?
um it's one of the things that really I've been incorporating. um I see how things just are, um and there is no good or bad, positive or negative. And so you know um again, I kind of feel like those are labels. So yeah, and just I guess observing experiences and such, and being able to, you know I've always been able to see different perspectives and such. But just how do I translate that? So yeah, I've gone away from the separateness, and just everything is connected. And I see how things work the way they do and such. And just instead of connecting to all that other stuff, I just try to flow with it, and yeah, be authentic in that sense. And so in doing that, I trust that everything is happening for me and for my highest good. And so I don't see things as good or bad. I just see them as the best for me, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, they're just part of an experience. You know, I think one of the biggest things NDE people say is everything is as it should be. And don't judge the experience. It is what it is. So I can totally relate to that. And one final thought that I wanted to ask you, as far as this, what would you recommend for people that are going through that? You know, be- because I know in your initial stages you didn't know what was happening to you, and that seems to be a common theme. And then people will either run to be medicated or get very into other different thought streams, to try to find their way. Um, and it can be, feel very chaotic. I was just wondering if you had something that you'd want to say directly to anyone who is struggling with those things, with these thought processes, uh, this internal dialogue, addiction, and just kind of in that space you had been. What would you say to them?
um that your experiences are valid in whichever way you saw them, heard them, felt them, that they're valid. And that the first step for me in healing was to release it. And so to find a safe space to talk about it. So you don't have to, you're not alone. You're never alone. There is always help somewhere if you just ask for it. And if one place can't, I found that they will always guide you to somewhere that can. And so, your experiences are valid, your voice matters. Don't hold that stuff in. Because yeah, and you're worth it. You are loved, I love you, and you are worth it. So I see the light in you. So
Beautiful. Sorry, made me emotional. Thank you. That is so beautiful. And I thank you so much for sharing your story here today. I know how much it will mean and affect others. And I'm so thankful you're using your voice to get all of this out into the world so people don't feel so alone, and to know that there's other people who have been through this path and there is that light. I truly appreciate and love you.
yeah, thank you.
And
I'm super to have been here.
and I'll have all Keshia's information to contact her um, in the description. And thank you for joining us today for the chat. We appreciate you and so much love, you all.